What is up, everybody? My name is Logan Sharon, and welcome to CTF Sharon Talks Football. Today, we are not going to be talking about football. I wanted to move on from the football topic today because I'm kind of footballed out this week. But today, I wanted to do a video that I think a lot of people would enjoy. It is my ranking on every Disney Pixar movie. I think this video would be fun just because I've always loved Pixar movies from when I was a little kid all the way to now. And also, it's kind of interesting to look at just because Pixar was at such a great streak with their movies. And then at one certain point, they just fell out of the water and they were just trying to pick it back up. So looking back at it, I think would be pretty fun. So before we get into it, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos whenever I post. Well, all out of the way, let's get started. Alright, so here's the tier list, and I have 5 different categories, and I kept it to kind of Pixar theme just to make it more fun. At the very top, we've got Incredible. Below that, we've got Filled with Joy. Below that, we've got Just Keep Swimming or Decent. Below that, we've got Didn't Seize the Moment. And at the very bottom, we've got Stung Like a Beamer. Alright, so the first movie we've got here, also the first movie of Pixar, is Toy Story. I used to have Toy Story in Incredible, but now I would just put it in Filled with Joy. And let me explain why. It's an incredible movie. I love Toy Story. I've always loved Toy Story, even as an adult now. But ever since all these new movies have come out and the more I've grown up, I still love it, but I wouldn't compare it with some of these movies that are out now. It's still a fantastic movie, one of the best movies ever made, especially for the time because this kind of animation just was not popular and it was very new at the time. But it's just not as good as some of these other amazing movies on this list. But it should be recognized as one of the animation's greatest successions, bringing us Woody and Buzz, one of the best duos of all time in cinematic history. It's hilarious. The story is awesome, and I absolutely love this movie to death, but it will be in Filled with Joy. The next movie we've got is A Bug's Life. I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. I think Bug's Life is a good movie, but trust me, when we get to these other ones, you'll understand why more and more this is down here. If you compare this movie to Toy Story and some of these other movies that are coming up, it's a pretty big downgrade compared to those movies. It's still a good movie, but there's still some wrong with it. The animation somehow looks worse than Toy Story's. I know this is at the certain time that this was made. I get that, but it just doesn't look as nice as Toy Story. The story isn't all that great, compared to Toy Story. It's fine, but it's not as good. I will say the villain Hopper is absolutely amazing. One of the best Pixar villains of all time. But overall, this movie's fine, but it's not the best. Next movie we've got is Toy Story 2, and I'm going to put it in Incredible. I was always arguing with myself on which Toy Story movie is my favorite between this one and the third one, but now I can confidently say that this is my favorite Toy Story movie of all time, as well as this also being one of the best sequels to a feature film of all time. The story is 10 times better than the first one. The action is cool. It's hilarious. I absolutely love the new characters, Jessie, Bullseye, Stinky Pete. I love them all. And I think this is such a great sequel to an already great first movie. I think this movie is awesome. Next movie we've got is Monsters, Inc., and this one will also go in Incredible. You guys are going to start seeing a trend with the next 5 Pixar movies. This is probably, in my opinion, the golden age of Pixar. This is where Pixar has made their best movies. They have been on their best streak. This is where they were best. So if I had to say one Pixar movie that's the funniest out of all of these, I would give it to Monsters, Inc. I think this movie is absolutely hilarious. I love Mike Wazowski. He's awesome. He's hilarious. I love Sully. He has such a warm heart. I love Boo. She's adorable. But the main thing that has always surprised me with this movie, even watching it today, is how well this movie works with 2 villains. Usually when a movie has 2 villains, especially when one of them is a twist villain, it usually just doesn't work out well, but this movie somehow works with it, and it works really well. First off, you've got Randall, who's just such a great rival to Sully and Mike, and he just tries to be better than them, and he always tries to one-up them. It's great. And then the twist villain comes in, and he's one of the best villains out of any Pixar movie, and he is Mr. Waternoose. At first, he just comes off as this great boss to Sully, where he's just trying to keep his company alive no matter what, and he's just trying to make sure the company benefits to a good society, to their culture. And then when Sully and Mike try to get Boo home, that's when he starts to show his dark side. That's when he starts to show his villainous. He's intimidating, he's scary, and he will do anything to keep his company alive, even during the dark times. I think this movie is just so great, and if you haven't watched it, please watch it. It's amazing. Next one we've got is Finding Nemo, and this one will also go in incredible. For a while, this used to be my favorite Pixar movie, but it's no longer my favorite. We'll get into that later, but this is still one of the best Pixar movies ever made. It's about a fish named Nemo that gets lost in the sea, and his dad Marlin tries to search the whole ocean to find him. And then also you've got Dory, who's pretty funny, and trying to help out Marlin to find Nemo. And throughout this movie, you've got all these great side characters like Bruce and Crush, and they're all awesome in their own special way. And then Nemo gets taken to a dentistry in Australia, Sydney, to be exact. And he is met by this fish in a fishing tank called Tank Gang. And you've got fish like Gil, who's awesome, and he's such a great father figure to Nemo when he's lost. And I think this movie surprisingly has such great comedic timing. Like, whenever there's not that much jokes in this movie, but when there is one, it's just at the perfect time, and I think it works really well. But also one thing that like people are not shocked about is that this movie really does not have a villain. I mean, you can argue Darla, but she's not really a villain. She's just a crazy little kid that's just trying to get a fish. And if you're trying to say Bruce, just stop. Stop. It's not a villain. It was just a gimmick. Stop. Like, this movie is so great. Like, the emotions even is amazing as well. Like, this is one of the best Pixar movies of all time. You've got to check it out. The next movie we've got is The Incredibles, and it fits the name pretty well with this topic. It is incredible. When you watch most people's Pixar tier list, this one will always be like some people's like favorite of all time. It's not my absolute favorite, but it's one of my favorites. And plus, this might be a hot take, but this is one of the best superhero movies of all time. I'm not kidding you. Mr. Incredible / Bob Parr is such a great protagonist for this movie. He used to be Mr. Incredible. He used to be amazing back in the day. And then once superheroes became illegal, he had to become a father and a regular one, which is hard to do. And he's struggling with his new job. And he's just going through hard times. And then he's just trying to live his life. And then you got Helen Parr / Elastigirl, who's also trying to live the normal life after being a superhero. And she's able to do it pretty well. But him and also his friend Frozone, or Lucius, are struggling to live through that lifestyle. Lucius is trying to get Bob to like live the normal life, but Bob's just not listening to it. He just can't get himself away from it. And then now on the secret mission Bob is taken on, he is met by a villain, and probably the best Pixar villain of all time, Syndrome. Syndrome is such a great villain just because his backstory is amazing. He was just a normal kid that was a super big fan of Mr. Incredible that got rejected back in the day, but he was smart enough to figure out his own gadgets, how to like become his own superhero, and now he's a threat to Mr. Incredible. He's such a smart villain too. He's funny and he's also smart. I think for the most part, all the characters in this movie are great. Like, we already got Mr. Incredible, we got Frozone, we got Elastigirl, we got Syndrome. But I forgot to mention the kids. Like, you've got Dash, you got Violet, and you got Jack Jack. I absolutely love Jack Jack. And then how can I forget Egna? She's hilarious. She makes the super suits, and her favorite line is no capes. Like, no capes at all. I've always stuck with that line for years. I've always repeated it as a kid. I absolutely love her. But yeah, this movie is absolutely amazing. I know that dragged on a little bit long, but I just had a lot to talk about it. I think this movie. Next movie we've got is Cars, and this one might be the biggest hot take out of this whole list, but this is one of my favorite Pixar movies of all time as well. I just don't understand the hate with this movie. Like, I don't understand how people cannot like this movie. Like, I can understand with the sequels, but this movie is just so good. You got Lightning McQueen in the Piston Cup. He's trying to race to get the gold. And then he got lost in the middle of the freeway trying to get to Los Angeles for the big tiebreaker race. And he ends up in Radiator Springs. And he learns a lot from it. It's great. Like, you got Lightning in this movie. He's a rookie, so he's going to have a huge ego. He's going to be an asshole. But once he goes to Radiator Springs and he learns from his mistakes from mostly Doc Hudson, who is one of my favorite characters. And also, you've got Mater, you've got Sally, you've got Guido and Luigi. Like, you've got all these great side characters. Also, how can I forget about Chick Hicks? He's one of the greatest villains out of any Pixar movie, in my opinion. Like, he's not really a villain. He's just a really good rival, but he plays dirty whenever he races. But he's just so funny. Like, his one-liners are so repeatable. Like, he's just hilarious. But yeah, I don't understand how people dislike this movie. Like, I love it to death, and I'll watch it anytime. Next movie we've got is Ratatouille, and I'm sorry if this seems too much of a trend, but this one will also go in incredible. Like, you've got to understand, like, this was the golden age of Pixar. Like, they could not stop making great movies. It's historical. But Ratatouille has such a unique story. It's Remy the rat that's trying to become a head chef. He's trying to become a cook for a highly star-rated restaurant. And you have such great other characters. You've got Alfredo Linguini, you've got Coletto, you've got Skinner, who's a great villain, and then you've got Anton Ego, one of the best characters out of any movie, in my opinion. Like, he's the Simon Cowell of Pixar movie, like a Pixar character. Like, he's great. Like, I love this movie so much. Like, this is probably one of the most rewatchable movies out of all these Pixar movies, other than Cars. But I absolutely adore this movie. Next movie we've got is WALL-E. I could easily put this in incredible, but I'm going to put it in filled with joy. Look, there's some amazing things about this movie. Like, the writing is amazing. The characters are amazing. WALL-E and Eva are two of the, one of the best duos of all time. Just like Sully and Mike, Woody and Buzz. It's like one of the best duos. Their chemistry with each other is unmatched, even though they can't talk. Like, that's the thing about this movie. Like, the first 30 minutes of this movie, there's no dialogue. Like, there's no talking. It's just WALL-E, looking around Earth, which is destroyed, trying to see what's going on. He's trying to organize it better. And then Eva shows up, and he's curious, figuring out what's going on. And then you got all these people in space that are living in space now. They're all overweight. They're all living a completely different lifestyle. And it's ran by this robotic wheel on the ship. This is one of the things that's kind of bringing this movie down a little bit, is the villain. It's a little bit generic, but it works a little bit. I don't know. I know this is most people's favorite Pixar movie. It just didn't really fit with me very well. I just couldn't understand it. Maybe I'll just take a day to rewatch it, and maybe I'll think differently. But right now, I still think it's great, but it's not one of the best. Next movie we've got is Up. It's incredible. It's probably my second favorite Pixar movie of all time. Almost everybody that's done a Pixar tier list will say this about this movie. The first 15 minutes of this movie is the best 15 minutes out of any Pixar movie on this list. It doesn't compare. The chemistry between Carl and Ellie, their marriage, and what they go through is beautiful. The end of it is sad. It's really sad because Ellie passes, but it's gorgeous. But ever since Ellie's passing, Carl Fredricksen is just a little bit of a grumpier guy. He just doesn't want to be around anybody. He just wants to be on his own. But one promise he made to Ellie when he was alive, Ellie wanted to go to Paradise Falls and set her house there to live next to the Paradise Falls. So one day, Carl gets a balloon and attaches it to his house and flies it to Paradise Falls. And then the characters you have on side of Carl Fredricksen are great. You've got Russell. He's like this little Cub Scout that's trying to get all these badges, and he's trying to help Fredricksen. He can be kind of annoying at times, but he means well. And then you got Doug, who's probably my favorite character in this movie. He's this talking dog that's controlled by a collar that makes him talk. And I think he's so funny, but he's also really sweet. This isn't really related to the movie at all, but there's a Doug series on Disney Plus. If you have Disney Plus, please check it out. It's actually great. And then you got the villains. You've got these villain dogs that are ran by Charles Muntz. He's a great villain, by the way. Charles Muntz is an old adventurer that Carl Fredricksen used to idolize as a kid, but he was trying to find this majestic bird that is also a character that Russell named Kevin. I think he's hilarious. Or she. My bad, it's a she. But Charles Muntz moved next to Paradise Falls to find this bird. He's giving up basically his life to find this bird so he can make tons of money. And then Carl realizes that this bird needs to go back to her babies. And Charles Muntz is not having any of it, so now he is tracking down Carl and Russell and Doug. And it's just becoming a great action sequence at the end. This movie's emotional stakes are amazing. The action's great. I just absolutely love this movie to death. Next movie we've got is Toy Story 3, and I'm going to put it in incredible. This was the great ending to a franchise. Well, it should have been the ending. We'll get to that later. But before Pixar thought kind of stupid at the point, this was going to be like one of the best endings to a franchise. Toy Story 3 is absolutely amazing. You're starting to realize Andy's growing up. He's going to college, so there's no use for the toys anymore. So they get taken to this Sunnyside daycare with all these kids, and they're stuck there. It's like a prison. It's a prison break movie. That's why I love it so much. You've got villains like Lotso, who's probably the best villain at any Pixar movie. He's written extremely well. He's intimidating, and he is absolutely awesome. You take your pick on which Pixar villain's better between Syndrome and Lotso. Like, it's a very tough choice. It's one or the other. I love the new characters in this movie. Like, you've got Bonnie with her toys, and those toys are awesome. They're funny, too. Like, they're actually really funny. And that's what, like, the new characters in this movie are just so good. Like, this whole movie is amazing. It's such a must-watch for any Disney fan out there. Next movie we've got is Cars 2, and this is where the descent begins. This movie stung like a beamer. I'm sorry, there is a good amount of fans for this movie, but I just have to be, like, real. Like, this is one of the worst sequels ever made for a movie. Like, the premise of Cars 1 is about lightning racing. Like, it's racing. And then Cars 2, you've got this stupid spy story that just doesn't work well. Like, I get what they're trying to do. They're making it different, but it just doesn't fit. And then they make Mater, like, basically the main character, which, don't get me wrong, I love Mater, but he just doesn't fit as a main character. That's like if you're taking Shrek and you're making Donkey the main character. Like, it just doesn't work. And as I'm saying that, I forgot they're actually going to make a Donkey movie, so it might actually be as bad, if worse. But this movie just doesn't work well. The villains are stupid. Like, Mouse Axelrod's a twist villain, and his plan to, like, try to take away fuel is, like, it's stupid. Like, you have to, like, rewatch it a couple times just to get the premise of it. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And the worst part is, like, there's actually things in this movie that actually are cool. Like, you've got the World Grand Prix idea. I love the idea that Lightning's racing world champs from all around the world. Like, this was a great idea, but they should have stuck to that instead of adding this stupid spy shit. Like, I actually really like Francesco Bernoulli. Like, I think he's a great rival to McQueen, but we hardly get to see it because all the stupid spy stuff is in the way. So if they would have stuck with the World Grand Prix stuff, like, this could have been a pretty good movie, but instead they ruined it with this other dumb idea they included, and it just completely ruined this movie. Like, don't watch this one. Like, better off just watch Cars 1 and just go to the third one. Like, it will flow a lot better. Next movie we've got is Brave, and this is, in my opinion, the worst Pixar movie ever made. I did a Pixar movie marathon, like, a while back, and I found this to be, like, the most boring, the most unenjoyable, and the movie I wanted to end the quickest the most. Like, all the characters are super forgettable. The comedic timing's awful. Like, the humor's terrible in this movie. And it's just so boring. Like, it's such a boring movie. Sometimes I forget it's a Pixar movie. The whole time I thought it was just a regular, generic Disney movie. Yeah, I think this movie absolutely sucks. And if you're doing a marathon, you're better off for, like, your own sake skipping this one. This movie's awful. Next movie we've got is Monsters University. I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. I think this is one of the most underrated Pixar movies out there, but I don't think it's one of the best. Like, it's a prequel to Monsters, Inc., so I think that's interesting. It's like based off a monster, like, college. It's called Monsters University for a reason. I think it has a good story, but some things just don't land. The comedy is just nowhere near as good as Monsters, Inc., which isn't a bad thing, but, like, it's just, if you're comparing it to your successor, then it's kind of, like, throwing it off. Also, some of the new characters just aren't as rememberable. Like, the whole Uzma Kappa crew is just not, like, memorable at all. Like, sometimes you forget who they are. Like, just some of these characters just don't work well in this movie. And also, just like Finding Nemo, it's kind of hard to figure out what the villain is in this movie. Like, but unlike Finding Nemo, there actually really is one. Like, you could say Dean Hardscrabble, but in my opinion, like, she's just a very strict principal. I don't think she's a villain. But if you had to pick on what the villain is in this movie, I would say Johnny Witherton. He's just that douchebag asshole rival to Mike Wazowski. Like, he's not really a villain. He's just kind of a douchebag. But my main problem with this movie is that they didn't really stick to, like, one plot. Obviously, it's in the same, like, scenario, like you're in college. But, like, you had all these different plots. Like, you have Mike trying to, like, finish college. You have him trying to learn all these different techniques. And then you have Sully, like, being a douchebag as well. He's just not as, like, he's not the same Sully we knew from the first one. So it's a little bit of character development, which isn't a bad thing at all. So you got that, and then you also have, like, the scare games aspect, which I do enjoy. But if they just stuck with, like, one plot, I think this movie would have flowed a lot better. Like, it's an underrated movie, but it's not that great either. Next movie we've got is Inside Out, and I do think this is one of the best Pixar movies out there. And thank God this released when it did, too, because you had stuff like Cars 2 and Brave, and Monsters University, while being underrated, just wasn't fitting the standards as these boys, like the top boys up there. And then once Inside Out came out, it gave people a lot of hope for this franchise. Well, my bad, not franchise, I would say studio, but I do love Inside Out. Like, the story of it is absolutely amazing. Like, you have all these characters that are controlling a kid's brain, like, it's like whole personality. Like, it's such a great, like, story idea. You've got 5 main emotions / characters. You've got joy, who's obviously the happy one. You've got sadness, who's also super important in this movie. Then you've got anger, who's probably the funniest character out of anybody in this movie. You've got fear, and then you've got disgust. I'm not sure why disgust is in here, probably just to fit a role, but she's fine. But what happens is Joy and Sadness accidentally escape out of headquarters, and they're trying to make their way back to headquarters, but it's kind of a long journey and kind of tough to get back. But you are introduced to Bing Bong, who's probably one of my favorite Pixar characters. I absolutely love Bing Bong. He's such a great character. But if you want to talk about a movie that is filled with emotions, literally, this is the movie. Like, if you want to watch an amazing movie with a great story, like, you have to watch Inside Out. It's a great movie. Next movie we got is The Good Dinosaur, and this is one of the worst Pixar movies as well. Just like Brave, it's one of the most boring movies out of any of these Pixar movies. Like, the atmosphere is boring, the characters are boring, and the story is boring. Like, I kind of forgot what this movie's even about just because it's so forgettable. Like, even, like, rewatching this, it's one of the most boring Pixar movies. Like, I don't even want to talk about it. It's such a boring movie. Next movie we've got is Finding Dory, and this one is in Just Keep Swimming. Like, it's kind of a mixed bag because it has stuff that can put it up here, but it also has stuff that can put it down here. But overall, it's around here. Like, I love the story of this movie. I love the idea. Dory is now moved in with Marlin and Nemo, but Dory obviously has short-term memory loss. So she obviously came from a family. So it shows the backstory of it. Dory used to have her parents, and she accidentally gets lost. So on a random day, Dory finally remembers about her parents. So she wants to go look for them. And she searches all over the ocean, but then finds out that she used to come from an aquarium. Like, I love the idea of this movie. Like, it's awesome, but the things that make it drag is just some points of this movie just makes it kind of drag. Like, it just doesn't really, like, sometimes it feels a little bit too long. And at some points of the movie, you're just thinking to yourself, like, just get into it. Like, just get on with it. But overall, it's a decent movie. You've got some pretty good side characters. Not as memorable as Finding Nemo's, but you've got some good characters. Like, you've got Hank. I think he's a really good character. I think he has a little bit of an attitude, but I kind of like his sense of humor. Like, it's pretty good. But yeah, not my favorite, but Finding Dory is one of the better sequels out there. So if I had to put a tier list for sequels, it would be in one of the top. But as a whole movie, it's good, but not that good. Next movie we've got is Coco, and here it is. I think this is my favorite Pixar movie of all time. There, I said it. I think it's better than all the Toy Stories. I think it's better than Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles. This is my favorite Pixar movie of all time. So basically, this movie is based on the holiday Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, and just they take this idea and soar with it. Like, it's amazing. So the movie is about this kid named Miguel who loves music more than life itself. He loves music and he cannot live without it. But his family just won't let it happen. They won't allow it just because of the family backstory. His great-great-grandmother, Mama Jimenda, was married to a musician who ended up walking away from the family. So instead of living with that depression of him leaving, she forgets about him and music, throws it out the door, and starts a family shoe business. But Miguel doesn't want to make shoes. He wants to make music. And he takes his great-great-grandfather's guitar out of a building, and he turns into a skeleton. Basically, he finds himself into the land of the dead, and he meets his ancestors. But also he goes through all these different scenarios, and he also meets this character named Hector, who ends up being really important later in the movie. I'm not going to spoil it too much, just because there's a lot to get into, but this movie is absolutely phenomenal. Next movie we've got is Cars 3, and I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. It's a very good finale for the Cars franchise with movies, but if you have to compare it to all the other movies, it's not as good as the others. Like, there's scenes in this movie that are good, but there's also scenes in this movie that kind of drag. Like, there's some scenes in this movie that are just a little unnecessary. And also, some of the new characters just aren't that great. Like, I like Cruz enough, but Jackson Storm is just a really low end of Chick Hicks. He's basically Chick Hicks, but not cool. So yeah, not the most memorable characters, but this is a great ending to a franchise. So basically, Lightning is getting old. He's getting close to retirement, and he's trying to make one final great run, but he's struggling against Jackson Storm, this new rivalry character. So it's a fine movie, but not the best. Next movie we've got is The Incredibles 2, and I think this is the most overrated Pixar movie out of all of them. This is gonna be the first movie and didn't seize the moment. And I think it fits well with that topic too, because fans were begging Pixar to make a sequel to Incredibles, because it's been 14 years at the time that they've made an Incredibles. So they delivered, but they didn't deliver that well. Like, it felt kind of rushed, and the story just wasn't that good. So superheroes are still illegal, and they're trying to find a way to make it legal again. And then they find these two characters, these two siblings, and one of them is trying to make superheroes legal again. And then the other one is good at the start, but turns out to be a twist villain, which is one of the worst twist villains out of any movie, in my opinion. Like, she just doesn't work well. Notice how I didn't give names, just because, like, they're so forgettable. But the main attraction to this movie that people get people interested is how Jack is finally has powers. Well, he had powers in the first movie, but none of the family members saw it. But now they finally see that he has powers, so he's the main attraction. Obviously, Jack's a great character in this movie, and there is some good stuff in this movie, but if you compare it to the first one, it's awful compared to the first movie. And I'm not trying to bash on it the whole time. Like, I used to think this was an amazing movie at theaters. I saw it twice in theaters because I thought this movie was so great. But I ended up being wrong, and I ended up figuring out that it's just not as good as I thought. And like I said earlier, I think this is one of the most overrated Pixar movies out of all of them. So it belongs and didn't seize the moment. Like, that's literally what it did. It did not seize the moment. Next movie we've got is Toy Story 4, and this is kind of a controversial one just because my opinion on this movie has changed so much. Like, when it first came out, I had it down here. Like, I did not like this movie when it came out. And then I watched it a little bit, and it just started to grow higher and higher. And I still will stick with my word that this movie should not exist just because Toy Story 3 was the perfect ending. So I don't know why this movie was made. Obviously, it was made for money. But for what it is, I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. Like I said earlier, I don't think this movie should be a thing at all. Like, I think they should have just ended off of Toy Story 3 and just kept, like, making little shorts like they have been, like after Toy Story 3. But for what this movie is, it's not bad. So, obviously, Woody is just not being played as much with Bonnie, and he's just trying to find purpose in his life. And he gets introduced to this new character named Forky. I do love Forky. I think he's a great character. But he's starting to, like, find out if his purpose in life is not being played with, and if his purpose in life is trying to help other toys. And they're all taken on a family road trip on an RV, and they get stuck near a fair, which which is where Woody finally finds Bo Peep again, which was his love partner at the time, and now they're finally reunited. But Bo Peep wants to stay. She doesn't want to leave. And she gets Woody to thinking if he's better off as a plaything or if he's better off as his own character, like helping others out. So it's a decent movie, but I wouldn't say it's like up on the top with the others. So I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. Next movie we've got is Soul, and I'm going to put it in Filled with Joy, or you could say Filled with Soul. It's definitely a really good movie, but it's not really like the most rewatchable movie in my opinion. Like, it's good, but you don't go back to like watch it over and over again. At least that's how it is with me. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of this movie, but I do know it's a great movie, and I would probably get killed if I put it any lower. But it is a good movie, so I'm going to put it in Filled with Joy, but there's not really much to talk about just because I'm not the biggest fan of this one. So yeah, I'm going to put it in Filled with Joy. Next movie we've got is Onward, and when this movie came out, I thought it was kind of down here, but I got kind of a soft spot for it now. It's in Just Keep Swimming. So the main two characters in this movie are these two brothers, one of them being Ian, who's kind of a social outcast, and he's kind of the shy one, but he's pretty loyal. And then you've got Barley, who has a really good heart, but he also makes trouble all the time. And they're finding out their whole lives, like, how come their dad passed away, and they wanted to see him one last time. Ian never got the chance to see his dad, but Barley wanted to see him again. He only saw him when he was really little. But it ends up being Ian's 16th birthday, and his dad made the promise where when his 16th birthday came around, he got a special gift, and that gift was a wand that made magic. And it had a spell included to where for a whole day, Ian and Barley can see their dad again. But it kind of goes wrong. Only one half of the dad is there, and that would be the leg part. And they're trying to go on this journey to figure out how they can see their dad one more time. And it's an interesting story, but I think the humor in this movie just doesn't land as well. Like, I think it could be better, but it could have been worse, but it's not one of my favorites, so I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. Next movie we've got is Luca, and this will be the last movie to be put in Incredible. I adore Luca. I think it is such a well-written movie, and it's such a great, underrated movie. I love the characters in this movie. Like, Luca is like the shy but obedient son, and he's trying to be the best kid he can be. And he's met by Alberto, who is kind of living on his own. Well, like, it gets more into that later in the movie, but I'm not going to reveal it just because I don't want to spoil the movie fully. But these two become best friends, and they end up wanting to get a Vespa. So they go to this little town where they are met by two new characters. One of them being the villain, and the other being another, like, mainstay, like in this movie. One of them is Julia, who's another great friend to Luca. She's always been really loyal to him, and she's such a great friend. And then you've got the villain in this movie, who's not really a villain again. He's just kind of a rival douchebag. And his name is Ercole. Like, he's just that douchebag that just thinks he's better than everybody. And he's just kind of a jerk to Luca and his friends. But this movie just has such good emotions. And it has such good chemistry, like, between, like, all the characters. And I think this movie's just written really well. If you get the chance to watch this movie, please watch it. It's a really good one. Next movie we've got is Turning Red, and I'm going to put it in Didn't Seize the Moment. I think it's a bad movie, but I don't think it's as bad as the three below it. Like, it's not a very good movie at all, especially for it after, like, being released after Luca. Like, I think the story's kind of bizarre. I think the whole movie's kind of bizarre. Like, and I just never found the interest to, like, really get into it. So I don't really have much to talk about it just because I don't really care about this movie. So let's just move on. Next movie we've got is Lightyear, and this one will go into Stung Like a Beamer. If you want to talk about a movie that I've never been, like, more disappointed in, like, this is the movie right here. When I heard about the trailer about there being a Buzz Lightyear movie, I got so excited. Like, I thought this movie would be awesome. Like, the sound of it sounds cool. Andy, obviously, finding out about Buzz Lightyear was about a TV show that he always loved to watch, and this was basically about that TV show. And then once you start getting into the movie, all of, like, the hype and the entertainment you would think you would get, it's thrown out the window. This Buzz Lightyear is so generic. It's like nowhere near as memorable as the Toy Story Buzz. And I know it's trying to be different, but it just doesn't work well. It's just so generic. And I think this Buzz is just kind of stupid. Like, I just don't think this Buzz is like very enjoyable. And I think the whole story is just really dumb. Like, I hate all the side characters. I think they're really annoying. And also, like, the one thing that pisses me off the most out of, like, in this movie out of anything is the villain. So obviously, if you know Buzz, it's going to be Zurg. But it being Zurg, you would think it would just be the robot. And then you find out it's another Buzz, but it's in the future. Like, this makes no sense. And the story of it is so stupid. Like, I felt like I lost brain cells when I watched this movie. So don't ever watch this movie. It's a waste of time. Even with how, like, cool it sounds and how entertaining it sounds, like, when you hear about the title. Like, just don't watch it. It's such a letdown. Next movie we've got is Elemental, and I'm going to put it in Just Keep Swimming. When I first saw this movie, I really did not, like, really enjoy this one, just because I think the main character is, like, kind of, like, she's, like, kind of unlikable. I don't care for the main character. I think she's a diva for no reason. And I don't really care for the other characters either. It's kind of a forgettable one. But if you take the time to watch it, it does have a good, like, story around it. So, like, basically this movie is basically to teach people to love people for who they are. And I do like that. Like, the movie's fine, but it's kind of forgettable at the same time. And that's been the biggest problem with these later movies. Like, even if they're fine movies, like, they're fine, but they're also forgettable. Like, you've obviously got these movies up here that are, like every single time you hear about this movie, you're going to remember, like, what, like, the one-liners are. You're going to remember what the movies are about, and you're going to remember the characters. And then you got some of the new stuff, and you're going to forget, like, what they're about and, like, the characters. Like, that's been the biggest issue. So, yeah, nothing against Elemental, but it's just not my favorite. And finally, for now, I know they're going to make a couple more movies in the future. The last movie we've got, and the latest one we've got, is Inside Out 2. And after seeing it in theaters and rewatching it at home, I can safely say that this is a really good movie. It will be put in Filled with Joy. This is such a good sequel to the first Inside Out. I don't think it's as good as the first one, but it's really good. So basically, Riley is growing up. She's getting really invested with hockey. She's becoming committed to it. And she's being seen by scouts in a high school to, like, go to play for high school. And she's going to be, like, a really good hockey player. And then you still got the 5 main emotions. You got joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. But you're also introduced to new emotions. And I think how they create these new emotions just works so well. Just because this movie is just so relatable. Like, if you watch this as a kid and you're going through the same kind of hormones, like, as Riley does in this movie, like, you're going through, like, the same scenarios, it's just so relatable. So I think that's why this movie, like, works so well. Like, you've got new emotions like embarrassment, envy, and ennui, but the main one and, like, the main, like, antagonist in this movie is anxiety. And I think, like, the story, like, the idea of an anxiety is so funny and so relatable. Like, it works really well. And, like, the antagonist role she plays, it just works super well because anxiety can take over the whole brain just like in real life. And she just gets into all these scenarios and looks into the future, but it doesn't help Riley at all. It just makes it worse. And she throws, like, the main crew out of headquarters, and just like the first one, but differently, they have to make their way back. And then Riley's trying to fit in with all these new friends, and her old friends that she's been with for the longest time are leaving, so it's like the balance between, like, do I stay with my old friends or do I try to fit in with these new friends? Like, it works really well. So hopefully they make some better movies after Inside Out 2. Like, right now they're on a good track with Inside Out 2. I think it's a great movie. And here is my final look at the tier list of Pixar movies. I think this was a pretty fun idea. And it's interesting to look in the future because we obviously have heard from Pixar themselves that they're working on movies like Toy Story 5 for some reason and Incredibles 3. Incredibles 3 could be interesting just because Incredibles 2 just didn't work well. So Incredibles 3 can be like Cars in a way where they try to end it off on a good note. So that'll be interesting to see. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm sorry if this video felt like it was dragged, but I had to really think about these movie placements because this tier list was not easy to do. And also, I wanted to do something different this Friday just because even as a football diehard as myself, like, you start to get kind of tired of it, like, talking about it every day. So I wanted to do something different. So if you guys enjoyed this video, then great. If you guys didn't, then oh well, like I understand. So don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos whenever I post. With all that said, I'm Logan Sharon. I'll see you next time.